If you are a designer, a blogger, or pretty much anyone that designs in the online space, then it's highly likely that you do a lot of repetitive design tasks where you're creating marketing assets for your business. The challenge is that this can start to take up lots of time, and that's why you always have to be on the lookout for smart strategies that you or your team can adopt to save time. And saving time is exactly what this tutorial is going to be all about. I'm going to show you how to create the ultimate reusable template for creating Pinterest pins using layer comps and smart objects. Now, even though we're creating a Pinterest pin in this tutorial, the real takeaway is the smart workflow and strategies, and these are strategies that you can apply to pretty much any design project. At the core of the strategy, we'll be taking advantage of layer comps. If you're totally new to layer comps, you may want to watch the layer comps basics primer video linked in the upper right. Now, layer comps are a feature in Photoshop that give you the ability to keep track of the visibility, position, and layer styles of all the layers in your document. So in essence, this lets you store different design mockups within a single document that you can jump between with one click. And this can be really powerful and can give you the ability to create smart templates for your repetitive design projects that will save you time again and again. All it takes is a little planning and a little upfront work to set up your template, and then you have an asset that is going to work for you and save you time as you move forward. So let's jump in and see how all this works. Okay, on screen we have this basic document. So there's an image, there are a couple headlines, and then I have this background bounding box there. So let's remind ourselves of what layer comps are, what you can do with layer comps, and then we're going to look at how we can use these to build a smart template. Now, my layer comps window is already open here on screen, but if for some reason you don't see that, all you would do is come up here under window, come down and find layer comps, and then you should get this panel right here. So right now I don't have any layer comps set up, but you can see if you just come down here and click the new layer comp button, or you could also do it from the menu up here, new layer comp, then it gives you an ability to set a layer comp. Now remember, the three options you're going to have are visibility, whether it's checked on here, the position, so the XY coordinates of everything, and the appearance, the layer styles, and so you can set any or all these within a given layer comp. So for this one, for example, I'm just going to call this one position because I'm just going to set the position. So I'll just go ahead and call this one position top, and I'll go ahead and click OK. Now, if I were to take my headline here, so I'm going to highlight everything that's part of this headline, the text and the background, and then I will just use shift click and I will drag it down to the middle of the page, and then I will come up here and I will again click new layer comp, and I'll call this one position middle, and go ahead, and I'm just going to leave position again and go ahead and click OK. Now I have two layer comps, and if I click between them, you see I can restore to either point, and at each point they were recording the position of all these layers within the Photoshop document. Only position. So if I were to do something now like turn off this background rectangle and go ahead and switch between my things again, things move around, but since it did not store that visibility, then whatever is currently visible in this document is going to stay visible or not visible when I click to a new layer comp, because these layer comps here only store position. And so I just want to point this out because this is going to be sort of crucial to how you set up and organize your template, and it's really up to you how you use your layer comps. So let me just go ahead and do another one here. I'm going to turn this back on, and so let's say I wanted an option to have a starting point that had this box every time, and maybe I want it on the bottom. So I'll go ahead and have everything still highlighted, so I'll go ahead and shift click and drag it to the bottom, and then I'll go ahead and do a new layer comp, and I will just go bottom one for bottom style. This time I'm going to turn everything on and go ahead and click OK. So now if I click on one of these, it's going to go back up there. Remember, I can turn on this box and go between these two, and it's not going to affect the visibility of anything, but suddenly if I click this bottom one, it's going to bring back that box. Now, the only point I want to make here is that there is not a right or wrong strategy. It's just what is going to be most efficient for your workflow. So as you create layer comps, think about what is going to make the most sense for you. You can have this as a starting point here, and then you can still come in and you can make adjustments, you can turn things off, and then when you export off your final asset, you'll have those changes. It just comes down to what is going to work the best for you for setting up these different designs, which are going to act as starting points. You want to get as much work done as you can. At the same time, you don't want to set up endless layer comps for every single possibility. Just think about doing the big organizational things that are going to help you as a starting point, and then some of the little tweaking you can leave for after the fact. But think about setting up these in a smart way so that it's going to save you time. At the end of the day, time, that's your most valuable resource. So you're going to try to organize a strategy and a workflow that saves you the most time. The other thing I'll point out here is that as of right now with these layer comps, they are all using these same shared layers. So for example, if I were to come in here and grab my text tool now, and I were to come in and change this line here, I'm just going to right now call this new headline, okay? So if I were to make that change, go ahead and apply that change, I can switch between my different layer styles, and it all has that new headline. Now this certainly could be a helpful strategy. For example, if you knew you wanted to export all your different layer comps, all your different designs, and you wanted to export those either to files or to PDF, which you can do, then you would come up here and you would come up to File, Export, Layer Comps to Files or Layer Comps to PDF, and then you could go ahead and choose the options here, and then it would export everything all at once. And because you only had to set that headline once, you really potentially save a lot of time. Imagine if you had 30 different styles, right? Then you change the headline once, you get your positioning down here once with your headline, and then suddenly you can export all of those assets having done that work once. Now, the main reason I'm mentioning this is only to say that it really depends on you, your workflow, what you're trying to accomplish. Because here's one strategy where I'm using all these headlines as shared assets between the different layer comps. But you don't have to work that way. I'm going to jump over to another file now, and within this file here, I am not using that strategy. I have different groups, and within these groups, I have different text layers. Now, that's not a big deal to me because I know I'm going to choose a starting point from my layer comps, and I'm going to choose one or two final assets. So having to come in and change that text, those headlines within those assets, not a big deal because I'm not going to be doing it 10 times, 20 times. I'm just doing it once or twice. So it's more important to me to have these separate layers, which lets me maybe style things, position things a little differently within those layers. And so that's how I'm saving time. So again, it comes down to you and your workflow. There are multiple approaches, there are multiple strategies, but you got to pick the one that's going to save you the most time. So let's take a look at this document now. Let's look at how it's set up. I'm going to talk about some of the smart strategies you can employ. I'm going to talk about how layer comps and then also how smart objects come into play. And then finally, what is that final crucial step to saving your document as a template? All right, so let's take a look and see how this document is set up. I have these different layers in which I have grouped different styles for sort of like the headline style that I might want. And if I just alt click through a couple of these, actually if I just turn a couple of these on and off, so we can see I have this style here, then down here we can say I have a style that's slightly different, and I won't turn them all on and off, but if I go down here, you can see now one where I have it's quite a different design, where I'm starting to incorporate these other rectangle shapes, more of a minimalist design, and here's another one here. And then these bottom two are add-on styles, and then my image layers. I'm going to talk about those in a second, but for now, just know that I have these independent title groups set up. Each one's a group, and then I am referencing these groups when I go to the different styles. And each one of these groups has their own text layers, so it's not like that first example where there was one shared text layer across all of the layer comps. But I know I'm only exporting one or two assets, so I'm not really worried about the fact that I have to go in and edit that text because I'm just going to be doing it for one or two styles that I choose on using. So just how this would work is I've set up these layer comps. So for example, you see this title style 1, which is this look right here, And then I just have a couple different styles here that easily changes the position of that. Now, of course, it wouldn't be that big of a deal to manually change the position. So you can argue that I don't even need these different top, middle, bottom layer styles, but it really comes down to your workflow and what you feel is going to be helpful. And so if you want to be able to just quickly tile through and see the different things, then you can set up as many or as few layer styles as you want. Just figure out the starting points that you think are going to be helpful for your workflow. Let's talk a few basic organizational strategies. You may notice down here that I have added color to my different groupings. That just gives me a visual cue and another way to visually separate these groups. Because if I had a couple of these expanded open, and it might become a little confusing as to whether this style is in this group or above, this just gives me another visual cue. Now all you need to do is when you're on a layer or on a group, you can go ahead and you can right click here, and then you can set one of these different colors, and that'll be applied as a little color label over here. Another organizational tip, I've organized right now my layer comps by the layer grouping style that's being used over here, but you can also drag and rearrange these. So for example, if I wanted all my top level groups to be together, I've added that top to the naming over here, but I could also re-drag anything over here. You can just drag and drop these layers. So if I wanted to pull all my top styles together, then I could organize things that way, and then I could go through all my top styles together. So it's really up to you. As you develop more layer comps, you can drag and drop and organize them in any fashion you like. Now, one thing I do like about grouping things together into groups like this is that if I want to then change sort of the size of everything here, because I have it grouped all together, I can just target the group layer, and then I hit my control key, and then I can resize everything all at once because it is all within that group, so it's all being affected. And then of course I can do that. I can reposition as I need to. And so it's just a really easy way to go ahead and make those resizing all together, make things resize all together because they all are within a group. Now I'm going to go ahead and undo that for now because I don't necessarily want to do that right now. Another thing I like about groups, so let me just come back to this style one top, and so that is this style right here. If I know I want to create a new style and I want to use some of the same starting elements, I can just copy the group. So I'll take this style one, I'm going to hit Control J, and then I'm going to use this new title style one copy, and maybe I'll call this like new font style or something. Maybe I'm going to use something where I come up with a whole new font, a whole new style, and so you can name this appropriately. This is just a bad name here. But anyways, the idea is that I've copied all those elements. Now I can come in and make changes, and then from there I can create a new layer comp. So maybe I would come in here. Maybe I'll take this top font here, and I'm going to change that font. So I'm going to change this to this font here. And I see that I still have my two layers turned off. I just want this one new copy turned on there. So let's do that. And then this font here, I actually don't like it in capital letters. So Instant Pot Tie is also, of course, just a placeholder. So I'm just going to call this placeholder first text line. And of course, you can set up your placeholder text any way you want. I have a name in here that doesn't even match up with this recipe. It doesn't matter. This is all just placeholder. Now, the other thing you could figure out is you're not going to be able to exactly know how to align things left and right align because you don't know what text you're necessarily going to put in here later. But I like to do things like left align certain things, so I know I can maintain that left alignment, and it just makes it a little easier when I resize later and I'm trying to align things. We'll see that in an example, but for now you may not want to worry about that alignment too much, so I'm just going to go like that, and I will nudge this down a little bit, and then I may take this bottom element here, this rectangle, which is with this My Wife Can Cook label, and maybe I'll drag that, and maybe I decide for this design I actually want that to show up at the bottom of the page. So I have a new style now, and I'll go ahead and twirl this closed, and again name this whatever you want. And then once I have that new style, I'm going to come over here and choose a new style, and I'll call this new style, and you could put something more descriptive, but that's fine for now. And now the visibility, yes, I want the visibility position. I want it to maintain position, so I'll do those. I don't really have styles here. Actually, there may be a drop shadow on there, so I go ahead and click it on. But it's up to you again. You can use alternate strategies as to what you include in different layer comps. I'll choose everything for now, and I'll go ahead and click OK. And so now I have this new style, and now I could choose that as one of my starting points. Now this is sort of an artifact from before. I'm going to drag that into the trash. Yes, get rid of that one, but here is this new style here. So that gives you the idea. With everything grouped here, it makes it very easy to duplicate a group and then use that new group to create a new layer style, a new layer comp. Excuse me, I keep mixing those up. Layer comps here, and of course layer styles are these little effects here you can add onto a layer. And if I jump down through a couple of my other layer styles here, let me layer comps here. If we come down to these minimalist ones here, you can see within these groups here, here's minimalist 2. So within these, I have these different background rectangles and background shapes that are giving me this white space. So you can figure out what design elements you want to include, and you don't have to necessarily have these across all groups. But again, if you start with the basic elements within a group, then you can very easily copy that and start working on a new layer style that's somewhat similar but has some variability. The other thing I'll say about this is a lot of times when I have these background shape elements, so I'm going to turn them off and on here, you can see that these here, even though they're separate elements here, I can turn them on and off together because I have them grouped within this folder. And the reason why I did this, imagine that I had even more squares than this, but even with just 2, rather than coming into a single rectangle and changing the color, I have created this adjustment layer, which is just a solid color fill layer. And because of that, and because I have it applied just to the group here, I can come click on this, and then I can very easily drag and change the color to anything I want. I can come over here on screen, I can pull a color from my design. So it just gives you a way to very quickly change the color of multiple elements. And this may seem like a small thing, but it's that sort of creative thinking about how you want to structure design and how you can build smart things into your workflow to save time. So anytime you have design elements like that, if you can create them as shapes and group them together, then you want to do a solid color fill over top of those. You can use this adjustment, solid color fill, put it above, and then have it clip down to just those layers. And then suddenly you can change the color of all those elements all at once. It's just something that saves you a little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel for now because we'll leave that as white. But that's just one more idea of how you can, think outside the box when you're creating these and try to really structure things in a way that are going to save you time. So hopefully you're already seeing how layer comps can be a really powerful way of building in variability in a lot of design starting points. But let's jump through and look at a couple other things. And so if I come down here, we've looked at all these different layer styles and how they have all these different layer comps. I keep doing that, all these different layer comps and how they have a layer style grouping here. Let me just go back to this first one. What we haven't talked about yet are these add-on styles. So you may have some things that build in some variability that are not even part of your layer comps. So I have that layer comp to basically set the positioning, some of the basic styles of my text, some of my background elements, but then below everything I have my image layers, which is the actual image that's being used, which we'll get to in a minute. And then above that, I have some of these add-on styles. And so my add-on styles are things like lightening the top of the image. And so this is just a curves layer that's applied to the top and does some brightening. I have another one here that does some darkening. You can also take some of these and you can apply blend modes like multiply that will darken the image. So it just gives you some other ways if you needed to maybe darken an area of the image so the text stands out a little bit more, or if you had light text if you had dark text and you wanted to lighten the image, you can do all that with all these little add-on layer styles. You can also do things like add a border effect that you can easily add on. And of course, this border effect will come into play no matter what. So if I do any of these and then I come down here and I click my little border here, that's why I'm calling it this add-on. Now what have I done? I turned off my image layer. There we go. So that's why I call it these little add-on layer things, because these are these little finishing effects that you can put on at the end, and it doesn't matter which of these layer comps you have selected. All you need to do is then come down to your add-on layer styles and add something in there. So you can think border effects, maybe if you have alternate logo, or maybe you have different little symbols of whether something's gluten free or other things. There are a lot of things, a lot of different ways you could use these add-on layer styles. So just get creative and think about what works for you, your workflow, and the design project you're taking on. Okay, so now that we've talked about all these different things, let's really look about how we use this as a template, how we set it up as a template so it can be used again and again with different images. So let's get to the image part of this. This is just a template image in here, really. This is sort of a placeholder image. Let's imagine we're starting, we need to bring in a whole new image. Let's see how that part of this works, because understanding this last part is going to be really crucial to creating something that's reusable and something that really has even more flexibility with another trick I'm going to show you that involves using smart objects. Okay, so this finally brings us down then to this bottom layer. These image layers, this is where you're storing that background image that's going to show up below all your layer comps. Now, this bottom layer, image layer here, if I turn it on and off, you can see that is the image, and that is the image that's showing up with all of these. But as you set this up as a template, you're going to need to bring in a new photo. So let me just open up a new photo real quick here. So I have gone ahead and I have opened up this new image here. So we're just going to Control A on that, Control C to copy it, and then I'm going to come back over here into this one, which was where we were working. And so right above this image layer, I'll just create a new layer and I'm just going to paste right into there. Now Control T to resize, and then if you can't see all your bounding box, you can also use this Control 0 trick just to scale things down for a second so you see your full bounding box. I'm just going to drag that up something like this, and then Alt resize from the center there and drag that in so that fits in like that. And now I'll hit enter to apply that, and then I'll go ahead and I will fit back to screen. So now we have a new image in here, but let me show you one of the problems you can run into if you just try to copy a paste image in here when you already have existing layer comp. If I now try to turn on one of my layer comps with that new image in there and I click on it, it is not going to be highlighted. It is not going to be visible here because that layer did not exist when you created your layer comp. And so this layer 2, it's not recognizing it, and so it is turning it off because it was not a part of this layer comp. Now if you had one where visibility wasn't checked on, then yeah, it might still show up, but you're going to have a lot of layer comps where that does not apply. So that is not going to work, and you're going to have to find a workaround so you can get this new image to exist and work with your layer comps. All right, well, let's try something else. Okay, so this layer below here is called image layer. So maybe it's that simple. Maybe if I call it image layer, so it has the same name, maybe then it is going to stay turned on when I click this layer comp. So let's try it again. No, it still does not work. Well, maybe it's because we have another image layer here. Well, let me go ahead and for a second, I am going to trash and get rid of this image layer, and I'll turn that back on. And again, let's try turning that on. No, it still does not work. So how do we get around this? Well, first let me hit Control Z a couple times just to bring back that layer and the layer below it that we deleted because we still want to have that there. Okay, so I brought that back and I have this turned back on. So what are our workarounds to get this to work? Okay, so one possible workaround, if this layer below was not a smart object layer, then you would be able to use Control E, Command E on a Mac, and collapse this layer into this layer. And so in essence, this layer here would become this layer, and then this would work. But it's not going to work right now because I have this set up as a smart object. And having it set up as a smart object is actually the second method, and I'll show you why that is the preferred method. So I'm going to just turn this off from right now, and we'll see that the layer here, the layer that's showing up underneath all this, this is actually a smart object layer, which you can tell by this symbol right here. And so this smart object is linked to its own document. So if you double click on that smart object, then it's going to bring up that in a new window here. So this is my smart object. It's just called image layer. And so let me just jump back to that picture we brought in. If I copy this again and I paste it over here, but before I paste it, let me just go back to that template, and here's where the image is in here. So I'm going to just take it out of here so we can see that is no longer in there. That is out of there completely. But so if I come back over here and then I paste it in here, and then I'll do the same thing where I do my Control T to resize. I'll use my Control 0, that would be Command 0 on a Mac, and then I'm just going to reposition this. I'll Alt drag it in the center, and that get that something like that. And so then if I save that, So you've changed your smart object document and you've done a save, and you come back over here, watch what happens. So it's saving 96%. When it gets to 100, boom, it's going to live update in here because this is referencing that smart object. And so now if you jump between any of these layer styles, it's going to work. You have that there because it is referencing this smart object layer. But there's another reason why smart objects are really great to use in this manner. Let me just go through one example. So let me just go back here. I'm going to grab this again, so Control C. So this is just my image in here. And I'm going to come back here and I'm going to paste this somewhere. So I'll just paste this, Control V, paste it here. I obviously want to resize this. So I'm just going to drag it down. I'm doing this all pretty quickly, but so I'm going to drag that down and I'm going to bring it up somewhere like that. I'm going to drag it down even farther, something like that. I'm going to put it on top of this white layer, which I have here, and I'll turn this white layer on here. And let me just go in and let's turn some of this other stuff off. So let me turn that off. And so this is, let me reposition this a little bit because it's bothering me because it's not really centered. Maybe not a big deal, but there. So let's just say I wanted a basic style here with this. So I could come up here on this and I could click something and I'll just call this basic 1, right? Basic 1. Okay, let's say you wanted another version of this basic, but you want your image to be smaller. So if I were to just resize this, Control T, and then drag it down, right? Hit Enter to lock it in, and then try to create a new style, basic 2, and hit Enter, it's not really going to work because I resized that so they both have the resized graphic, right? So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. I'm going to redo that until I get back to this larger image. All right, well, let's try doing this another way. So maybe I need to make a copy of this. So Control J, I make a copy of that layer. I'll turn off this one. I'll hit Control T. I'll do the same thing. I'll Alt and I'll resize. I'll hit Enter. And then I'll store this one as basic 2. Basic 2. Okay. And so now let's look. We have basic 2 and we have basic 1. So it worked. We now have two different layer comps that reference different layers, and those layers are using different sizes. So I'm able to vary the size of this. Here's the problem though. Here is the problem. If I decided I wanted to bring in a new image and I had multiple styles, that multiple layer comps that use different sizes of that image placed differently, I would have to go into each one of those and change this layer to the new graphic. But with smart objects, you're going to be able to get around that. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm just going to take these two layers that I created. I'm just going to ditch them there. Now let's just come back to any one of our styles. This minimum square bottom is an example of me doing this. But so actually, let me go to this minimum square top. Okay, so this one here, you can see that this is just using this image layer, right? Let me turn off of it and then turn it back on. It's using this image layer here. And this image layer is linked to this smart object right here. Well, let me do this. I'm going to make a copy of this smart object. So again, Control J, Command J on your keyboard if you're on a Mac. Control J, and so now I have this copy of this. I'm going to turn off the first one. With this copy, I'm going to hit Control T to resize, right? Then I'll also hit my Control 0 just so I can see the bounding box. And then I will Alt click and drag this way in so it's much smaller. I guess I have to hold down my shift when transforming with this also. So I'll do that and I'll click Enter. All right. And now I'll just call this one here new 3. It doesn't really matter at this point because I'm just doing this for example. Okay. So now I have this minimalist bottom, which is what we were looking at, right? And then this new 3. They are using different style images, different size images, different sizes of the same image. Remember, the problem before, if we used a regular image, was if I went and I updated that, then I was going to have to change all of the images in the different layer comps. But watch what happens here. if I click on this smart object or the copy of that smart object, they both link back to the same smart object. So when you made a copy of that smart object, it made a copy within your document, but behind the scenes, what is it doing? It's linking back to the same file. That means if I make a change in that file and I hit save, then it's going to update through all references of that. So now give it a minute, it updates there. If I go back to this minimalist 2 bottom, they are both now using that new image because they're both referencing back to that same smart object, that same document. And that is really the power of smart objects. It really gives you a lot of flexibility where you have another document that's controlling the image, but then with copies of smart objects within your document and your design, you can use that at different sizes across multiple layers, across multiple layer comps, and you are not having to redo all that work. It is all going to update on the fly. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you can see how powerful that is. If you're still confused, I just encourage you to get in there and experiment some with layer comps and smart objects, and you're really going to see how this all comes together. So what you need to do is, if you're setting up a template like this, some master template for design, you may want to have an image layers group below everything where you keep that smart object and that reference to those smart objects. So I had already set up in this document here before we started the video, but let's just do it on the fly so you can see how that would work. So I'm going to turn this off for now. Let's imagine that we don't have these layers here. I'll come back over here. I'll again hit Control C to copy that. Let me come back into my document. And so on a new layer here, if I hit Control V to paste that in, Control T, again, these are Control on Windows, Command on Mac, and then I'll hit my Control 0 to resize that. I'll bring that up somewhere like this, and then I'll Alt size it down, position it as I need. That's good enough for now. Go ahead and click Enter, and I'll zoom fit the screen. So once you have like that, and you bring your image over, then all you need to do is right click on that image and come down here and find Convert to Smart Object. You can also do it up from the menus up here, but the easiest way, just right click on the layer, choose Convert to Smart Object. It's going to go ahead, it's going to convert that to a smart object. You'll know it's a smart object because you'll see this symbol here. And now that is the way you want to have your file set up when you start to create your layer comps, because then your layer comps reference this smart object and you can double click on it. And so when you want to add in a new photo, you just come over here and you drop it in here and you save it within that file there, and then everything will update live in your file here. And if you make copies, even though they are copies, they will be referencing back to that one document. So that will allow you to use different sizes of that image or graphic within all your different layer comps. And they will all update if you just go back to your smart object and change that image. All right, we're almost there. This has been a long tutorial. I hope you're taking a lot away from it, but there's one more thing that we have to go over to really lock this in and make it so it acts as a template. Okay, so I'm just going to come back here to this title style 1 here. And so let's imagine you've spent all the time to set up all these different layer comps. You've given yourself a really powerful document that can act as a starting point for this design style when you're creating a Pinterest pin. But so now if you just go and save it, you might want to go ahead and save it so you have a saved Photoshop working document of this. However, if you want to create a new pin and use this, the problem is if you open up this file and make changes or accidentally mess something up, then you're going to overwrite your template. So how do we really make this as a template? What we really want to do is be able to click it and have it launch a whole new document that has all this built in so we can't screw up the template. Well, you can do that, and here is the trick. You want to come up here, you want to go under File, you're going to go under Save As, and you're going to name it whatever you want. So I'm just going to call this Pinterest _ template, and I have multiple ones in here, so I'm just going to call this C just to give it a clear name. Now this is the crucial part. You have to then use the extension PSD T for template. You see PSD for a normal Photoshop document. If you add that T, append a T on the end, then that lets Photoshop know that it is a template file. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I also went ahead and closed all my open Photoshop documents just to clean up my workspace. And just so we can see here on the home screen when you're opening new document, here is that template file we created, Pinterest Template C. Watch what happens when we double click on this to launch this as a new project. So I'm going to double click on that, and you can see Untitled 1. What it has done is it has taken that file that we created, that template, and now it used that to launch a whole new document. Now I have these guides on screen. I can just hide those with Control H, and my layer comps window didn't come up by default, but if I just go under Window, Layer Comps, we'll see all those layer styles are still here, and I can just cycle through and find the one that works. So save it as a template file with that T on the end of the PSD extension, PSD-T, and then you will have a file that's going to launch a brand new file every time. And what that means is it means you won't accidentally overwrite your template. And you don't want to overwrite your template because you would lose all that work that you've set up using that time up front. So you can save time now going forward again and again and again. And so then now to come full circle, we just launched this. And why did we launch our template? Because we want to create a new image, a new Pinterest image. So you would just come down to this image layer here on the bottom. Remember, you're going to double click to open up that smart object, which you created as part of your template. So we'll double click that. That opens up. And then maybe you're going to jump over to Lightroom. You're going to find an image that you want to use. So we'll go ahead and we'll edit this one in Photoshop just to bring that open. So that's going to open back up in Photoshop here. Let's give it a second to click back over to Photoshop. So there it is. We'll just hit Control A. We'll hit Control C. We're coming to this smart object layer. We're going to paste it in. And we're going to use our Control T. That would be Command T on Mac to resize. I'll do that Control 0 trick just to bring me the bounding box so I can see everything on screen. And then I'm just going to Alt resize this down to something I like. So if I go like that, then I can just resize in, fit it in there nicely. Go ahead and hit click enter. And remember, at this point, you don't need these other things in here if you have any old layers in here. You just need the one layer here. And actually, it looks like I resized that maybe a little too much there, but that's fine for this example. We'll go ahead and do that. And then when I hit save, remember, that's when the magic's going to happen, and that smart object updates here in your layer. Now, this style here obviously isn't going to work unless I do some resizing, but that's okay. I can start to go through here, and I can start to say, okay, I sort of like this. This is apple cheddar turkey burger, so it might work with this. I'm going to have to resize some text, but I don't want it on the top there, so maybe I want it on the bottom. So title style 2 bottom. Let's see what that looks like. Looks like that looks pretty good. Here's another one of those bottom styles. So I sort of like that one. So I might choose this as my starting point. And remember, once I've done that, let me just look and I can see that, okay, that one's turned on as an artifact in our template where we messed up. But so here it is here. So this is my whole thing. And since it's all in the group, I can easily resize, reposition as I need to. But the first thing I want to do is just come in here and make some of the text changes needed. So I will choose this text, Control A, put my caps lock on. This is going to be apple cheddar, right? And then let's go to that other text here, this text here, and Control A. This is going to be a turkey burger. Don't worry about if you're losing something, because this is when you're going to come in here and you're going to make the adjustments you need. So this is center aligned. I just need to make this text a little smaller. So let me click off of it and back on for a second. So it will make those adjustments. So I'm going to make this smaller until it fits on screen, and I can decide whether I need 2 lines, whether I need 1 line, where I want everything to align up. And so that apple cheddar, then I could say, okay, let me come in here. This text, I am going to grab it. I'm going to pull it over so it's aligned to this edge, right? position it there, and then I'm going to resize out from there, and I'm just going to use this to make sure it's sort of aligned above that, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. Bump it down a little bit. Then I have this block below here, so shift in there. All this can come up a little bit, right? And then the whole style is still within here, so now I can grab and move it all around together, and I think I just need to size it all down a little bit. And I also see how I've gotten my positioning a little off, but I'll deal with that in a minute. So let me just size it down a little bit, and then let's get it recentered. And so something like that. So you can see how very quickly you can just come in here, make the changes you want, and have a final pin without having to go through and try all these styles by creating them each and every time. And so I think maybe I also want to adjust just the color of a little bit of the text here. So this apple cheddar text here, let's just go to my text here, over here, and we're going to drop down. We're going to choose this color here, something like that. Click OK, and then we're also may grab that rectangle, and we're going to also update that. And so maybe that is what I would do, and I would call that my final image. So anyways, the point here is not what this image looks like. The point is the whole process that I've gone through to show you how to use smart objects and layer comps and use them together to create a really smart template with built-in variability that's going to save you time again and again and again. And it's going to launch a new file every time, so there's no chance you're going to write over it. You're going to have a good asset that's going to continue to work for your business. All right, thanks for sticking in here for this whole tutorial. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned a lot. If you did, please click the subscribe button below to support this channel. Please use the bell notification to get automatic notifications of this channel. Share with your friends. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.